going to look at lack of transcendental knowledge or ignorance. And it's all under the heading, why we find it difficult to surrender. And remember me saying that this surrender is on a continuum. Even though we've come, we're absorbed in material life, we've now surrendered initially, we're now in Krishna consciousness, but that surrender is on a scale. And that is why we can tell it's on a scale, because not everyone is a sannyasi, not everyone is a Uttama Adhikari. There's a scale by which we are. On the scale, the graduation on the scale is also about our level of surrender. So lack of knowledge, transcendental knowledge, we're going to go into that today and see how much, if we can cover it all within the time frame. We'll see. In Bhagavad Gita 2:20, the shloka is there. Na jayate mriyate va tadachin nayam bhutva buhat Bhavita na va na bahu ajo nitya shashpato ayam purano na hanyate ananyamane sharire. And what is that? What's the translation? It says, for the soul, there is neither birth nor death, nor having come into being does he cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Srila Prabhupada explains, qualitatively, the small atomic fragmental part of the Supreme, qualitatively, the small atomic fragmental part of the Supreme, can you just see that? Is there any way to make that slightly smaller, Navi?
Wait.
So I can get all the text. If not, don't worry. If it's a problem, don't worry. I can't hear you.
We can see it fine.
Okay, good. Okay.
It says,
just some words will come off the end. Yeah.
The last bit is the body is subject to 6 kinds of transformations.
Okay. You see, he undergoes, I couldn't read that bit. So he undergoes changes like the body.
Yeah.
Sometimes the soul is called the steady akuta star. The body is subject to 6 kinds of transformations. It takes its birth in the womb of a mother's body. It remains for some time. It grows, it produces some effect, gradually dwindles, and at last vanishes into oblivion. The soul, however, that's the body. The soul, however, does not go through such changes. The soul is not born, but because he has a material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth, and the soul does not die. Anything which has birth has to die. And because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no present or future. So that point there is a very important point. Srila Prabhupada explains that this is the beginning of spiritual knowledge. This is the beginning of actually making spiritual progress. So we're revisiting it, and I've already apologized for the devotees, the advanced devotees, long-standing devotees who are made lots of progress in spiritual life. This is not a beginner's class for you, but these classes, you can use it as confirmation. For the other devotees who may be in the majority, who they're not yet surrendered to Krishna, they're at the beginning of their spiritual life, then they need to take careful note, because this actual information is what Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas are saying. This is a foundation. This is the building block. If we do not get this bit right, this distinction, and Lord Krishna, when he starts to actually give transcendental knowledge to Arjuna, this is what he starts with. He starts to make a very clear distinction. So Arjuna knows. So we must also become equally convinced that we are not these material bodies. Although the body is taking birth from some mother's womb, And though it's going through the change transformation from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul is constant within all of that, but the body is changing. That understanding must be very clearly accepted, because that way we can make the distinction and then do what we need to do for the benefit of the soul, which is our real identity. The soul is not born, but because one has a material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth, and the soul does not die. Anything which has birth has to die. And because the soul has no birth, it therefore has no future. Then it's another verse, 2:16. Nasato vidaye vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satha. Ubhayo api tristo anyas, to anayas tadva dashabi. And what does that mean? It says, those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, there is no endurance. Non-existence means what? It means this material body, but not just this material body, this material universe. Although this universe is so vast, beyond the comprehension of the scientists, they have concluded in their, by using the Hubble telescopes and many other telescopes that can see into deep space, there is no end to the limit of space. There's no end to it. And yet, although it is so vast, it's still, because it has a beginning, it will also come to an end. It will be wound up. So those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent material, there's no endurance. Enough the spiritual, there is no cessation. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. The point that was made there, I may have said them the slide before, 6 things. When we are asked to, or we're challenged about what's the difference between something material and something spiritual, we can use those 6 points to actually very quickly demonstrate. It doesn't matter whether it's ourselves we're talking about a microbe, we're talking about the cosmos, we're talking about whatever is material. It has 6 symptoms. It has a beginning. There is some birth. It grows and develops. It reaches maturity. It produces some byproduct offspring. If it's human beings, it produces some children. It starts to dwindle and age, and then it disappears. Those symptoms, anything material, whether we're talking about ourselves or we're talking about the vast cosmos, it will go through that. But the symptoms of the soul and something spiritual is only one quality. It always was. It always is, and it always was. It is permanent, not changeable. So that distinction, we must understand that, because that's the beginning, as Prabhupada will tell us, of actually getting rid of this ignorance. And ignorance is stopping us from being surrendered to Krishna. The purport says there's no endurance of the changing body. We're trying to so many products and we're all into it. Yes, I will use this anti-wrinkle cream and I use a plastic surgery and so many things to try and stop the delaying, the aging process of the body, but it doesn't really matter. The body will change and it will decay and it will eventually finish. The body is changing every moment by the actions and reactions of different cells. And it is admitted by modern scientists, and thus growth and age are taking place in the body and is unstoppable. But the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all change, and the body change, the body and the mind. This is the difference between the spirit and matter and spirit. Matter will change, doesn't matter how you try to delay the process, but spirit is constant, it doesn't change. Nature and the body are ever changing, and the soul is eternal. This fact sounds very simple, but it's a foundation on which we build our spiritual life. Because until and unless we know this distinction, we will not be able to make the decisions and make the choices. And at the end of the day, it will be about a choice. No one will force us and beat us into spiritual life. Even parents who try to do it with their children, at a certain age, the children rebel because they want to make another choice. The choice may be forced on them by the parents, but at a certain stage, either they'll run away from home, they go to university, or somehow they'll make different choices. So for us, it will always be our choice. But our correct choice, the proper choices, when we make them, is when they're based on this type of spiritual knowledge. When we know that we are not these bodies. Even something as simple like prejudices. Prejudices cannot be given up because we're hardwired into our prejudices. You know, I'm from this nationality, I am this gender, you know, prejudices of so many types. But most prejudices are based on bodily concepts. They're not based on spiritual concepts. Spiritual concepts are way above prejudices. So we need to have this clear, very clear understanding. So Srila Prabhupada, what I was just saying, Srila Prabhupada is saying much clearer. This is the beginning of the instruction by the Lord to the living entities who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. That is our problem. Srila Prabhupada talks about Krishna consciousness in all of his books, in nearly every single purport, attaining and developing Krishna consciousness. Why is it? Because we are at the moment, until we do that, we are covered by material consciousness. So Lord Krishna is actually also saying, he's not using the word developing Krishna consciousness, but he's actually saying, this is the beginning. And until the living entity starts to do this, he won't be able to remove the influence of material consciousness, which is ignorance. Removal of ignorance, the reestablishment of the eternal relationship between the Supreme Lord, worshipable Lord. This is how ignorance is removed. When one establishes that eternal relationship. Well, how will we establish that relationship if we're not absolutely clear that actually I am eternal spirit soul? Eternal spirit soul is part of it. And the next thing is that I'm eternal servant of the Lord. And that will come a little bit later. And the consequence of this understanding, or understanding the difference between the part and parcel entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can understand the nature of the Supreme through study of oneself. And the difference, because one and Supreme can be understood with the relationship between the part and the whole. What that is saying in very simple terms is that simply by knowing who I am, by knowing I'm not this body, just by focusing on that reality, I can then understand, yes, I'm not this body. If I'm not this body, I'm spirit soul. So in that way, then I must be part of some greater spiritual reality. And that then is my relationship being established with the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita going on, 8.4, the verse is saying, Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate. That's why I'm yoga samsiddhaha kalenatmani vindati. And there the translation is, in this world, there's nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism. And he who has achieved this knowledge within himself in due course of time, when we speak of transcendental knowledge, we do so in terms of spiritual understanding. As such, there's no sublime, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Knowledge is the cause of our bondage. Ignorance, rather, is the cause of our bondage, and knowledge is the cause of our liberation. So, in case I'm losing anyone, the whole point of this presentation, this little segment, is about we need to destroy ignorance. We need to surrender. And so ignorance is preventing us, is one of the items, one of the obstacles preventing us from surrendering to Krishna. And it's no amount of university degrees. You could be a double, triple professor, but if it's material knowledge in whatever subject, that will not help. What is required is this transcendental knowledge about who we are, about the nature of what our constitutional position is. And later on, Srila Prabhupada will talk about the constitutional position. That it's constitutional, it's unchangeable. It's the original position, is that we are spirit souls and we are servants of the Lord. This is the beginning of spiritual knowledge, this transcendental knowledge. And by this, we can now start to think about, okay, if that is my identity, if that is my position, then what do I need to do to line up with that? This knowledge is the mature fruit of all devotional service. And one who is situated in transcendental knowledge, he needs not search for peace anywhere. He enjoys peace within himself. In other words, this knowledge and peace are culminated in Krishna consciousness. this is the last word in Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is not a speculative thesis, Srila Prabhupada says. In the same 4th chapter, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna that this transcendental science, evam parampara praptam, all the devtas from Vivaswan, all the devtas were educated in Bhagavad Gita. And it's not only the devtas, all the manus, everybody, anyone who wants to do this business of helping jivatmas to come out of material entanglement or to make sense of how to live in the material world, they need the instruction of Bhagavad Gita. So in that way, the statement is here. This is culminating, this knowledge, this transcendental knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness. Nothing is higher than the Bhagavad Gita for this basic philosophy of what our identity is and what we need to do to reconnect with our constitutional relationship with the Lord. The living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme, as in the case of master and servant, which is another very important point to be made. This master and servant. Another aspect of why we can't surrender is about ego. And when we come to that, please remember this point I've made here, that master and servant relationship is very important, because one of the reasons why our egos go out of control is because we actually do not see ourselves as a servant of the Lord. And even when we actually initially surrender, we still struggle with the ego aspect. As we still want to be the ones in charge. We still want to dictate. We still want to go in our direction rather than the direction that the Lord is actually set, rather than the direction that the Lord's advanced devotees, the spiritual master and the chariots have set. We still want to go our own way. That's because we still have not accepted our position, subordinate position of servants to the Lord. Such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance. So don't forget all of this, all that I'm saying, and I hope it's not too long-winded, is to show the way to counteract ignorance is by this very clear, sharp, transcendental knowledge. My presentation may not be so sharp, but doesn't mean that Bhagavad Gita is dull. It doesn't mean that Srimad Bhagavatam is dull. There may be my inadequacies to present it in a clear, sharp way. But the point is, just see my direction. My direction is, it's there. The clarity is there in Bhagavad Gita. The clarity is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. And we should take that, because without that sharp clarity of spiritual knowledge, we will not be able to overcome the ignorance. And ignorance means we'll always see ourselves in the wrong way and we'll always do the wrong things. Wrong things is we're preparing to stay here. We want to make ourselves very comfortable here. And everything material must finish, including our bodies, including this whole material universe at some stage. That is not wisdom. Wisdom is, I must reclaim my spiritual identity, and therefore, as I'll go into other slides to show, reconnect myself in that relationship and then start to set my target for another destination, not a temporary destination, a permanent destination. Bhagavad Gita concludes like that. Srimad Bhagavatam concludes like that. So this transcendental knowledge, it clarifies our identity as spirit souls and eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. And this is required in order to destroy our ignorance. So ignorance is the thing we're targeting in this session. Moving on, in the Brahma Samhita, the Lord Brahma tells us some very, very clear knowledge now. We've talked from Bhagavad Gita, we've taken so much information about who we are, our identity. Now, things that we can't work out ourselves about the Supreme Lord, we'll never be able to speculate on it and get any degree of accuracy. Lord Brahma, who's the first created being, he gives us that information. So what is he saying? He's telling us, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchit Ananda Vigraha, Anadirade Govinda, Sarva Karana Karanam. He says, Lord Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has eternally blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin. and is the prime cause of all causes. If you're coming from Bharatiya culture, this may not sound very profound, but if you're coming from, especially Western culture and Christian background or some other background, the biggest struggle you have, and the question that they ask all the time, okay, so there's a God, but who made God then? This challenge is always there because the Western mentality cannot think about that he is the actual source of everything. So here Lord Brahma is making it very, very clear, very crystal clear. He's the original and he's the primal cause of all causes. See? And then also he's going to go on and he's going to give full description. He's not going to leave it vague. He doesn't leave it vague about what the Lord looks like. He gives nice description. Venam kavantam aravinda dalaya taksham bahavatamsam asitam buddha sundaranam kandarpakoti kamaneya vishesha shobham govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Lord Brahma is continuing, and now he's doing other things. He's giving further descriptions. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, bedecked with peacock feather, and the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds. And his unique loveliness charms millions of cupids. It is well known that of all the devtas, Cupid is most beautiful, is most charming. But yet, here Lord Brahma is saying, millions of cupids cannot compare to the beauty and loveliness and charm of Lord Krishna. Giving details. This detail, I'll tell you now, you won't find this level of detail in any scriptures, anywhere. The matchless beauty of Krishna, the supreme personality, the supreme, I can't reach the last word, Nabi, something in Golok, is being described. Krishna is all-pervading cognition. He has a spiritual form, and the form of Krishna is not a fanciful creation of imagination. Form vis-a-vis the utilizing beauty of this world. When Brahma saw in his ecstasy of pure devotion is being described, Krishna engaged in playing on his flute. That flute by enchanting musical sound attracts the heart of all living beings. Just as the lotus petal produces a pleasant sight, the two beautiful eyes of Krishna, who causes the manifestation of our spiritual vision, displays the unlimited splendor and beauty of his moon-like face, the loveliness that adorns his head with peacock feathers, the corresponding feature of his spiritual feature of beauty of Krishna. Just as a mass of blue clouds offers a specific soothing, pleasant vibration, the complexion of Krishna is analogously tinged with spiritual blue color. The beauty and loveliness of Krishna is far more chanting than that of Cupid multiplied millionfold. The point has just been made twice. So we have seen, if you grasp the point I'm trying to make, we have seen beginning to grasp who we are as spirit souls and our identities, and then our position with servants of Lord Krishna. Then that whole Lord Krishna, he's the essence of all beauty. He's all spiritual. He's the cause of everything. But then where does he reside? So that is that identification we have to somehow get hold of. It's not that in one lecture we're going to get hold of it and make it make sense, but it's the beginning of a journey. But it's a very important part of the journey to know that who we are spiritually, who the Lord is, and where he's located, so that we actually have a sense of that is the mission. The mission is to re-identify ourselves, reconnect with the Lord, and then eventually go back to that place, which is our original home, the spiritual world. The spiritual world is the greatest reality beyond this limited material world of our existence. This world we know is made of temporary matter. I can't read the last part of it there, Nabi.
Second.
But the permanent.
Yeah, but the permanent spiritual world is made of spirit, which is essence of all life. The spiritual world is also known as Vaikuntha, a place of no anxiety. There's no death, no disease, no enmity. Life is harmonious because everyone has a common purpose, transcendental loving service to the Lord. That vision must be there. That understanding must be there. That is the transcendental knowledge. Unless there is some of that, then what are we aiming for? What are we aiming at? What is the goal? Everything here is temporary. So it's not that everything will fit together very nicely, but in the surrendering process, this knowledge is part of what is required so that we can actually start to use it to counteract the material knowledge that we have gained and that we are continuing to gain because we are immersed in a material atmosphere. So in the spiritual world, we have bodies. We have bodies, but it's not material bodies. Srimad Bhagavatam gives wonderful descriptions, and they're male and female forms. But yet in the spiritual world, actually there is no marriage as we know it. We have consorts. But there's also no mundane sex life as we know it. And sometimes devotees, because we are in material consciousness, we can't understand this. But yet we can understand it. Because if you think about, yes, because here the biggest attraction here is between male and female. That's the greatest energy in everything, every species of life, not just human beings. That energy and that attraction between male and female, culminating in sex, that's the greatest attraction, greatest pleasure. So you say in the spiritual world, the consorts is there, the attraction is there, but no sex life is there. But we need to understand that on a spiritual platform, we get a little glimpse of this sometimes. Think about when you've been in a big festival, Rath Yatra festival, or some other program. When you're in that program, you're in wonderful kirtan. You're actually, you're absorbed. When you're fully absorbed in the Lord, do you think of sex life then? There's no such attraction. Even if you see the opposite party, there's no sense of you want to enjoy them in any way. Many times we've all got this experience. When that activity is over and the blissful feeling has gone away, then the mundane feelings come back. But at the time when the blissful feeling is there, the kirtan, the Rath Yatra, the whatever, the absorbing class, no, these material desires, they don't disturb us. So imagine that you're in that state all the time. That is the state you're in. It's spiritual perfection. So and you don't have the material body anyway. One of the features of material and spiritual body is that these material bodies, they may look very good on the outside, but inside they're full of all kind of nasty things. Spiritual bodies are not like that. There's no intestines. There's none of that yucky stuff is there. The body is simply, the soul and the body are connected. You can't make a distinction. And in that state also, in the spiritual state, every aspect of the body can do the function of the other part. So in that way, and that is how the devotees know this. That is why when they're offering, they're offering boga and offering flowers and such forth in the temple, the non-devotee is thinking, well, how does the Lord eat? He doesn't come and eat. He looks as if everything is still on the plate. He simply has to look at it. He simply has to look at it, and the job is done, because his body is spiritual, and one aspect of his body can fulfill the function of any other aspect in that way. And there's many, many examples of that. So this here, no anxiety, no problems, no difficulty, no headaches in the spiritual world. That is our original home. And we need to have a sense of that. The Supreme Person has unlimited energies, both spiritual and material. Spiritual world is made of completely spiritual energy, which is characterized by complete happiness, full consciousness. He lives on each Vaikuntha planet, either in his original form or as Krishna or in the Vaikuntha form. The new Vaikuntha planets are all luminous and beautiful beyond our imagination, far beyond our imagination. So the topmost of all these spiritual planets is Golok Vrindavan, which is simply a replica of our Vrindavan here. And the funny thing is that Krishna always appears and actually conducts his pastimes in this Vrindavan, which is a complete replica of his transcendental Vrindavan. The material world is simply a shadow of the spiritual world. So real life and variety, real beauty, real knowledge, everything is there in the spiritual world. This material world is just a reflection of the spiritual world in so many ways. We have to just actually understand it. We have to hear it many times, but we need to actually start to take hold of it. So our ignorance will only be destroyed by transcendental knowledge. Nayam loko asmi ayajnasya kuto anya kuro satama. O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? And this sacrifice is very important because whatever form I'll read this translation, then I'll come back to what I was going to say. Whatever form of material existence one is invariably ignorant of his real situation. In other words, existence in the material world is due to multiple reactions of our sinful lives. Ignorance is the cause of sinful life, and sinful life is the cause of one's bondage in the material existence. Now, the point about sacrifice is this, is that one of the best ways one has to take action. It's not that we can just do nothing and then get salvation. It's not like that. We have to take action, but that action will always require some sacrifice, beginning with hearing. I'm going to talk about the 9 processes of devotional service. But the simple process recommended in this Kali Yuga for making spiritual progress requires a little sacrifice, requires a little tapasya, and it's chanting the Maha Mantra. But how many devotees will actually take to that very nicely and then gradually try to increase and increase and increase the quality and the number of their rounds? That sacrifice is required. But without some sacrifice, we will not be able to attain. And that sacrifice is linked to choice. No one will force us to do. We have to actually make the choice. This is good for me. I will do this tapasya. And that tapasya is required for everything. Somebody's getting up to go to work when we used to go to work. But somebody's getting up to go to work, and he's getting up, because he has to take the train, he has to take the bus, he has to take so many connections. So he's getting up early and he's preparing himself and he's leaving home, and it's a 2-hour journey before he gets to work, and it's a 2-hour journey back. He makes that sacrifice. Why? Because he's going to earn and take care of his family with that money. So everything requires somebody who's going to study. They want to become a lawyer, doctor, teacher. They have to sacrifice, studying to be able to get that reward, that qualification. So sacrifice is required. Similarly, to become established in our spiritual position, that sacrifice is required. And we have to accept it in the same way we accept going to work, in the same way we accept going to uni, in the same way we accept some other sacrifice to get some material result. We have to be able to do this sacrifice to get the greatest result, spiritual result and reward. Then Srila Prabhupada goes on to say, the human form of life is the only loophole. There's 8,400,000 species of life, big as an elephant, tall as a giraffe, small as a mosquito, but still, the only body that allows us to make tangible spiritual progress is this human body. He says it's the only loophole by which we may get out of the entanglement. Even when we become devtas, it's not so easy to get out of the material entanglement as it is when we have a human body. The Vedas therefore gives us a chance to escape from the position to the path of economic comfort, regulated sense gratification at last. It means to get out of the miserable condition entirely. But the problem is, in our ignorance, we may not even see this material condition as miserable. No, because I want a better house. I want a better car. I want a bigger bank balance. And if I have that, then I've achieved something. But it is temporary. And this is the ignorance. So only without this transcendental knowledge, we will not be able to see that even if I get a bigger house, even if I get a bigger bank balance, even if I get a better material condition, it's still temporary. So what have I gained at the end? How many years will I get that for? And even if I say I want to pass it on to my family, but where will I go when I leave this body? So this human body is the opportunity to get out. And the key point that I want to make, and maybe I've overemphasized it, is that without this transcendental knowledge, we will not be able to get out of this ignorance and material conditioning, which is a cycle that we have to try to break. Then in Bhagavad Gita, again, 4th chapter, we're given very nice advice how. Not just advice, is directive. How do we get out? How do we get this transcendental knowledge and really take hold of it? And it tells us, Tad vidi pranipatena, pariprashnena sevaya, upadekshanti te jnana, jnaninas tattva darshana. Translation, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. That self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you. Why? Because he has seen the truth. The Guru doesn't speculate. The Acharya doesn't speculate. He's not saying, oh, I think so, I have an opinion, or I have a theory. He doesn't speak like that. Guru doesn't speak like that. He speaks according to actually what Shastra has said. It is directly so. And sometimes the reality is that he speaks with such authority that actually it's not, initially when the person who is covered with ignorance comes in contact with the Guru, they find it offensive. I can tell you that, just a little aside, I can't hear you. Are you speaking to me, Navi Prabhu?
No, I'm not. Just having a little tiff with Jayanti here.
Okay. But I was giving a little aside, and the little aside was that how I came to ISKCON. Every devotee has a different route how they came to ISKCON, and my route in coming to ISKCON is just unique by me, not unique by any standard, just by me. I found a book in my friend's house, Srimad Bhagavatam. So I started to read this Srimad Bhagavatam. And when I started reading Srimad Bhagavatam, it was 6th canto. When I started reading, Srila Prabhupada was so authoritative. He was so clear. I used to argue with him. I used to close the book and put the book down and say, who does he think he is talking like that? Because I'd never heard anybody speak so definitively, so clearly, unambiguous. It was so clear that it was too challenging for me. I used to close the book and walk away and think, who does he think he is? But what, tomorrow I had to come back and pick it up again because it was nectar. So the Guru speaks like that. He never speaks his opinion. He doesn't have any pet theories. He's giving you as is from Shastra, like that. So he's not speculating. He's already been worked out. He's giving you. It's like when you go and do some qualifying course. I want to be an architect. I want to be an engineer. I want to be a lawyer. Your lecturer is not working out what I think it should be. He already knows. He gives you the syllabus. And then he's going to grade you on it. You have to pass your assignments. So in that way, the Guru has got the syllabus. And he's giving straight like that. So the way to get this transcendental knowledge in the best way is by approaching the Guru, that fixed up spiritual master. And I'll tell you something else about the spiritual master, is that we in the beginning, we think, well, will I ever find one? Yes, you will, but it all depends on the desire in your heart. The desire in our hearts is a very, very important, because the Lord is there and he is actually answering. He's answering and responding to our request. So if that strong desire is there, definitely, sooner or later along the journey, you will meet that qualified Guru. This part of spiritualization is doubtably very difficult. It is, it's not easy. But either nothing of any value in the material world is easy either. Does the Lord therefore advise us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself? Not anybody. He must be only giving the Lord's instruction. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following the principles of disciplic succession. So you're getting it from your guru, and so it's handed down. Same ripe mango has been handed down all the way. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and the person in disciplic succession can give the message of the Lord as it is. Lord Brahma is giving us Brahma Samhita because he saw the Lord and he actually got the realization. He's giving it directly like that. He's not making it up. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing their own process. And it is a fashion of foolish pretenders. So here, you know, this applies in many different ways. But the point I'd make is that everyone has their brain, everyone has their intellect, and everyone has their likes and dislikes. But I would say part of what this means is that not that you so much want to go out and be a big time preacher, but still surrender to Bhagavad Gita, surrender to Srimad Bhagavatam, surrender to their acharyas who have already worked it out, the 6 Goswamis, you know, all the devotees, surrender to them and take their instruction and take it seriously, because I can assure anyone you will not be able to work it out better than them. And a lot of the pitfalls waiting will be eliminated if we simply follow in their footsteps very nicely. I'll just jump a few slides here. So Srila Prabhupada makes a very nice statement. The first birth is from our parents, but real birth, real life begins when we accept the bona fide spiritual master and render service unto him. Because that service opens up the way for actually us really getting. And there's a lot to be said on this, a lot to be said on this. Because it's not just the instruction that the guru gives, the spiritual master gives, but it's this opportunity that he gives for service. And sometimes that service can be so, it can seem so menial. Oh, please, you know, can I get a drink of water? You give the water to the guru. It could be something that, okay, yes, it will wash the guru's clothes. It could be something simple. Yes, now the guru wants a little massage. It could be, no, I just want you to sit there, so if anybody comes, you can deal with it. It sometimes is so simple. And the unaware devotee sometimes is thinking, well, where's this? I want to hear violins, and I want to hear lights flashing, and I want to see things popping off. And then I feel I'm doing some great devotional service. It's generally not like that. It's usually very simple stuff. But it's who you're serving, and it's what you're practicing. Because the whole idea is that we are servants of the Supreme Lord, and what we have to get back into is just being able to just be comfortable being a servant. And it's not something very easy to do. So this surrendering process, as I said before, is on a sliding scale. Depending on who we are, we're all on the scale of surrender. Have I surrendered enough? Can I just sit there? Because in the guru's presence as well, one of the things that we sometimes find difficult, the guru always makes us feel like a little boy and a little girl. You could be a big prime minister. You could be a big president. You could be a big, you know, owner of a business. But when you're in front of the guru, you're simply a little boy and a little girl. That's the influence of the guru. And therefore, even when Lord Brahma is in front of Lord Krishna, Lord Brahma is a little boy. He may be big in the sense of the material universe that he's managing, but not when it comes to Guru, to Krishna. He's just a little boy. So similarly, we have to actually learn that level of surrender. And how will you do it? By fabricating it in your imagination? No, in my imagination, I'm a very humble devotee until the Guru shouts at you for the first time. Then you see how humble you are. You see how humble you are then, because it hurts your pride and your ego, and you don't like it. You want to leave the room, you want to do this, you want to argue back, and then he bashes you again. So the Guru teaches so much in the surrendering process by practical example, which is not, you cannot get it from any other way. So I'd say, don't be worried about finding a Guru. Have the desire in your heart, and Krishna, he knows everything. He will make that opportunity available. I just want to end, I'm ending now, Navi. So
That's fine. That's fine.
Part of the surrendering process is that the Lord has given us, and I'll maybe say a little bit more about this next time, that the Lord has given us this process. How do we surrender? He's given us, surrender means not just to sit and do nothing. He's given us a process by which when we start to surrender, you do these activities, very powerful activities, and they will help us to make spiritual progress. And it's the 9 processes of devotional service. They are described by Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto Srimad Bhagavatam as follows: to hear about Sri Vishnu's transcendental names, his forms, his characteristics, his possessions, his pastimes, and to chant about his pastimes and to remember them, to serve the lotus feet of the Lord, to respectfully offer service to the Lord, to offer praise to the Lord, to become his servant, to consider the Lord one's best friend, to offer him everything. These 9 processes are recognized as pure devotional service. And surrendering means that we start to engage in this process. It's not just a theory in our head. I'm theoretically very surrendered. No, it requires some activity, and the activity is one of these. They're all very, very powerful. You know, hearing. This is the starting of of spiritual life. And hearing, I can say to you, hearing is so wonderful, because for one whole year, just speak about my own entrance into spiritual life. For one whole year, I didn't hear any classes. I was not in association with devotees. I was simply hearing Srila Prabhupada's purport. I was hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and I was hearing Srila Prabhupada's comments. But I was hearing. These days, there's so much mechanism. I can do here on YouTube. I can come into this Zoom class. There's so much, but hearing is the beginning. Hearing is the beginning. Hearing must be there. And it said here, Parikshit Maharaj, you know, the last 7 days of his life, he constantly heard Srimad Bhagavatam. He didn't drink food or water. He was just hearing. And actually, Srimad Bhagavatam is like that. Srimad Bhagavatam is very, very sweet. But in the location of the holy Dham and in the association of devotees, it becomes even more relishable. So Parikshit Maharaj was simply hearing everything. So I don't know how much time I have, Navi. If I should stop here, then
Yes.
I can take some
So
questions.
you take questions. Yeah, take questions.
Yeah, okay. Then I'll stop here. And then I'll stop sharing screen, shall I?
No, just take the questions. See
Okay.
if you might need the screen.
Okay. So I've done a quick whistle stop tour, but my theme, I hope you got the theme, is about what stops us from surrendering. And one of the features of this particular class was ignorance stops us from surrendering. As long as we're caught up still in ignorance, which is material consciousness, we won't surrender. So we need transcendental knowledge to break that ignorance. And that was the whole point of what I was trying to make in this session. So please, any questions, any comments?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Prabhu.
Jai Devi. Was it a question or no question?
There is a question.
Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned about the Brahma Samhita. How independent is the Brahma Samhita? Like I've been told, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu discovered it, but then he's from this Gaudiya Sampradaya.
Yes.
So, like how? What about like other schools of thought? Do they accept the Brahma Samhita?
If they're Vaishnavas, Vaishnavas, they do. And then within their sampradaya, they may make some comments. But fortunately for us, the Brahma Samhita that we have, our comments is coming from Srila Prabhupada is the secondary commenter, is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. He is the actual commenter on Brahma Samhita. And I tell you, if you try to read the introduction, it took me some time to be able to read the introduction because Bhaktisiddhanta was so intellectually strong, so that it takes a little bit. But in our sampradaya, Brahmavada sampradaya, then it's coming through that Guru Parampara way. So although Brahma Samhita may be interpreted and translated on by other sampradayas, but in ours, we can say it's absolutely genuine because Bhaktisiddhanta He took it, knowing it's coming in the line with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then Prabhupada is giving it to us with his secondary commentaries and recommendation. So we know it's genuine and we know it's absolutely reliable. What others in other sampradayas do with it, that's not something you should worry about. Does that make sense,
Okay.
Evie?
It does make sense. The only thing that, like, for me, the way I see it is that it was discovered by somebody from this lineage, you know, from this school of thought. It's not as if it was discovered by someone else, and then they're like, okay, you know, this is what the Brahma, this is what this tablet says. So really, it's I'm in the wrong school of thought. You know, I should be in this one. That's my point. Like how, yeah.
If I can just interject, Anant
Yes.
it was found, as Jayanti just said, in the south of Bharat, in the Sri Sampradaya. So the Sri Sampradaya had possession of the Brahma Samhita. He only found one chapter, and obviously it's a very important chapter, but it wasn't necessarily held by any Gaudiya temple, because there were no Gaudiya temples in the south of Bharat at that time. So it was in the Sri Sampradaya that this was being held anyway, the scripture.
Yeah. But I want to thank you, Navi Prabhu. I want to add something more to it, Priti, and that is that the context. Look, okay. When I first read Bhagavad Gita, there was an Italian person who actually he had it was yellow cover. I don't know if you ever saw it, Navi. It was a yellow cover, small print, and it was Bhagavad Gita. And I somehow got a copy, and it didn't make much sense to me, but I was still holding on to it as Bhagavad Gita. And then when I read Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, then I never saw the other one again because it was so elaborate. So Bhagavad Gita is Bhagavad Gita if the shlokas are there, but the commentaries may be different. So, you know, I can't imagine anyone who's going to change the shlokas of, you know, Brahma Samhita, but how they comment on those shlokas, it may be according to whatever mood, according to what their perceptions are, to what their teachings are, but the shlokas will be the same. And that's why Srila Prabhupada made a point of calling it Bhagavad Gita as it is, because Bhagavad Gita is universally, you know, read in Bharat. But the commentary is what makes it all so different, you know? So it's an original text, and we have it from, you know, coming down, you know, Guru Parampara is very sound. And if you have any doubts about Brahma Samhita, as far as I'm concerned, you know, you can actually get rid of those doubts because it's a genuine article and coming from Bhaktisiddhanta interpretation and then Srila Prabhupada's endorsement. It's perfect.
And the person who found it is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's the Lord himself.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sam Prabhu?
Haribo?
Haribo?
You have a question?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Why not, Sam? You always have a question.
I'm just enjoying it. Oh, amazing.
Okay.
So what I would do then is that I won't do any more. Next week I'll start with this, but then what I'll do, I'll go on to the next aspect of surrendering. So transcendental knowledge is required, and I'll just finish that off next week. But then also I'll then go on to the next phase of what stops us. But just please see that we have to get to the point where we are challenging ourselves and we're taking the opportunity to actually understand what's stopping us from surrendering more and more. Okay? So in that way, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yeah. Thank you,
Prabhu.
Opportunity
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Prabhu,
Thank you.
I wanted to say today is Sita Thakurani's appearance day.
Okay.
And what we normally do is when there is a special day, we always just remember that person because we want to get that person's blessings.
Yes.
And of course, Sita Thakurani, who's the Dharmapatni of Advaita Acharya, is a very important personality. So we've just done a very quick presentation on her,
Okay, very
on
good.
her life history, get her blessings, so that we can progress in our spiritual life. And when you get the mother's blessings, then that accounts for a lot, especially when the mother is incarnation of Yoga Maya.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
very important personality. So we can very quickly just talk about her.
Okay.
She's regarded to be as worshipable as Sachimata, the mother of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu
Yes.
herself, because she's the Dharmapatni of Advaitacharya. And Advaitacharya is non-different from Mahavishnu and Sadashiva, who are the origin of who the father of the universe. So the mother is obviously Sita Thakurani. She's the eternal Dharmapatni of Advaitacharya, and she's the daughter of Nrsimha Baduri. She's married, of course, to Advaitacharya in Pulia Nagar. After the wedding, they settled in Shantipur. And Sita Thakurani's mood was always Vatsalya mood for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And she would advise both Jagannath Mishra and Sachimata on how to look after the boy. And we'll see a little bit later how she was there when Mahaprabhu appeared. Krishnadas Kaviraj has described the birth celebration of at the house of Jagannath Mishra upon the advent of Lord, giving special attention to the position of Sita Thakurani. Now, she went to see the new child upon the orders of Advaitacharya. She wanted to go and see, and she took many presents with her. But on the eve of the birthday of Mahaprabhu, Jagannath Mishra, he saw the signs that the Lord was coming. So he sent word to Advaitacharya in Shantipur that our son is about to take birth. And Advaitacharya was ecstatic. And him and Haridas, they would bathe in the river and they would chant and dance. And so Advaitacharya also sent Sita Thakurani to Mayapur, Navadvip. And she was there when the baby was born. She guided both parents how to care for the child. She had that Vatsalya mood, as we said. And she was the one to offer the first clothes to Mahaprabhu. So you can see that she is very, very important personality in the pastimes of Chaitanya. And Advaitacharya also had a residence in Navadvip, Mayapur. So sometimes he would live there and they would have Krishna Katha with the devotees headed by Srivas. After Mahaprabhu's birth, all the devotees prayed together with Advaitacharya and Sita Thakurani that the child might live long in Mayapur and have good fortune. So this is a little idea of the appearance of Mahaprabhu. There's Sachimata, there's Mahaprabhu, there's Sita Thakurani, come with the gifts. And this is a little account of, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, what Krishnadas Kaviraj has written. Would you like to read this?
One day shortly after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born, Advaita Acharya's wife, Sita Devi, who is worshipable by the whole world, took her husband's permission and went to see that topmost child with all kinds of gifts. She brought different kinds of golden ornaments, including bangles for the arm, armlets, necklaces, and anklets. There were also tiger nails set in gold, waist decorations of silk and lace ornaments for the hands and legs, nicely printed silken saris, and a child's garment also made of silk. Many other riches, including gold and silver coins, were also presented to the child. Riding in a palanquin covered with cloth and accompanied by maidservants, Sita Thakurani came to the house of Jagannath Mishra, bringing with her many auspicious articles such as fresh grass, paddy, gorcharan, turmeric, kumkum, and sandalwood. All these presentations filled a large basket. When Sita Thakurani came to the house of Sachi Devi, bringing with her many kinds of eatables, dresses, and other gifts, she was astonished to see the newly born child, for she appreciated that except for difference in color, the child was directly Krishna of Gokul himself. Seeing the transcendental bodily effulgence of the child, each of his nicely constructed limbs full of auspicious signs and resembling a form of gold, Sita Thakurani was very much pleased. Because of her maternal affection, she felt as if Adi Leela.
No,
No,
forget
she-
all that. I must have missed.
Okay.
This is the problem with copy and paste. Don't always get it right.
Okay. She blessed the newly born child by placing fresh grass and paddy on his head and saying, "May you be blessed with long duration of life." But being afraid of ghosts and witches, she gave the child the name Nimai. On the day the mother and son bathed and left the maternity home, Sita Thakurani gave them all kinds of ornaments and garments, and then also honored Jagannath Misra. Then Sita Thakurani, being honored by Mother Sachi Devi and Jagannath Misra, was greatly happy within her mind, and thus she returned home. In this way, Mother Sachi Devi and Jagannath Misra, having obtained a son who was the husband of the goddess of fortune, had all their desires fulfilled. Their house was always filled with riches and grains. As they saw the beloved body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, day after day, the pleasure increased.
That's it. Good. So there's a little bit more wonderful painting. Just these paintings are actually windows into the spiritual world. They give us a very good idea of how the scriptures describe, and they paint them so nicely, accurately. After Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, he was tricked into coming to Shantipur by Nityananda, and Advaitacharya received him at his ashram, and Sachimata and Sita Thakurani would cook for both Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda for days and days. I think it was 7 days in total they spent cooking for him after he took sannyas. And then eventually Mahaprabhu begged for leave to go to Jagannath Puri, or at least Sachimata said, please go to Jagannath Puri, at least it's not that far away. You're a sannyasi, but don't go too far away. So he agreed, and then Sita Thakurani and Advaitacharya used to visit Jagannath Puri every year to meet with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So according to the Gaura Ganodesha Dipika, Sita Thakurani is Yogamaya, and her sister Shri is Prakash, or manifestation of Yogamaya. Very important personality. And these pastimes where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda would take prasad at the home of Advaitacharya, they were very amazing pastimes, very humorous. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would say to Advaita, I can't eat so much. Don't give me so much prasad. And Nityananda would say, what is this? This is just a morsel of rice. And of course, it was a lot of prasad. But this is how they used to have a lot of humor between them and enjoy transcendental relationships like that. So thank you very much. That's Sita Thakurani Mata Ki Jai. And it's important to seek her blessings so that we can advance in our spiritual life. She's a very important person. And Yogamaya is very important to pray to Yogamaya that please allow me to enter into Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's leelas. So if there's no comments or questions, we can go to the Nishinga Kavach. I hope. Let me see if I can find it. Let me just switch off the recording.